You were asking me about chronology last time as we come to an end. Unger, U-N-G-E-R, Unger's Bible Dictionary is one of the best that I have found. Now, there are several good dictionaries, but Unger is a very conservative man. He says that Jacob probably went into Egypt about 1800 and 1871 BC. And that will fit in with my chronology. Many of the modern dictionaries and scholars believe that the Exodus took place somewhere 1200, 1250 BC. I believe the Exodus took place about 1400 BC because the period of the Judges was 400 years approximately. And Saul came to the throne about 1000 BC. So that begins to fit things in. So I recommend Unger's Bible Dictionary. Jacob was 17 years in Egypt once they got down there. In the 48th chapter, evidently, of course, Joseph had business to tend to. He had to be busy. So I don't suppose he saw his daddy every day, but they had someone taking care of him because Jacob's getting old, he's feeble, he's almost blind. Now he can see the outlines, but he has difficulty identifying. But whoever is taking care of Jacob sent word to Joseph that he needed to come and see his daddy, or evidently he's took a turn for the worse. In the second verse of chapter 48, one told Jacob and said, Behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee. And Israel strengthened himself and sat up on the bed. He evidently is bedfast, but when he learns that Joseph is coming, he grits his teeth and sets up on the side of the bed to converse with Joseph. Now Jacob begins by, when you first read it, it almost sounds like we old folks are recalling things that happened. But he has a purpose for this. He talks about how the Lord appeared to him at Bethel. And the promise was that I will multiply thee and will make of thee a multitude of people and will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. That promise was made to Abraham, repeated to Isaac, and repeated to Jacob. And now Jacob is telling Joseph about it. Verse 5. And now thy two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim and Manasseh were born before Jacob got to Egypt. So they're at least 17 years old and 18, 19, 20 years. They're about grown young men. So they're not little kids. Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born unto thee in the land of Egypt before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. This is an adoption ceremony. Jacob is adopting Ephraim and Manasseh as though they were Judah and Dan or any of the other 12 children that he's got. He's making them full heirs. But the next verse, thy issue, which thou begettest after them, you have any more children, you have 2 or 3 more boys, they're not going to be counted as my children. They will be a member of the tribe of Ephraim or the tribe of Manasseh, one or the other. You're not going to have a dozen tribes. What Jacob is doing is giving to Joseph the double portion of the inheritance. And so from this point on, Ephraim and Manasseh will stand on equal footing with the other 12 sons of Jacob. Verse 7, As for me, when I came from Padan Aram, Rachel died by me in the land of Canaan in the way, when yet there was but a little way to come unto Ephrath. And I buried her there in the way of Ephrath, the same as Bethlehem. Now the implication of this is, Rachel died prematurely. Had she not had problems and died in childbirth, she may have lived another 20, 30 years and begat other sons and daughters. But she died, and only the two, Joseph and Benjamin. Well, Ephraim and Manasseh are going to take the place of any children that Rachel might have born. That's just sort of beside the point. And Israel beheld Joseph's sons and said, "Who are these?" Now they're standing there with Joseph, and Jacob can see the outline, but he doesn't recognize them. He doesn't know which way they. And Joseph said unto his father, "They are my sons, whom God hath given me in this place." And he said, "Bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them." Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age, so that he could not see. And he brought them near unto him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said unto Joseph, "I had not thought to see thy face, and lo, God has shown me also thy seed." Didn't ever expect to see you, Joseph, but I'm seeing your children. So God has been very good to him. Joseph brought them out from between his knees, or from beside his knees. Some of the commentators have mentioned this, that he had them sitting on his knees, one on each knee. But these are grown men. They're not sitting on Jacob's knee. Jacob's not able to handle them. But they're standing beside him, and Joseph brings them back, and Joseph bows down to Jacob. Now the dream was that Jacob and his wife would bow to Joseph. There's no evidence that that ever happened. But Joseph bows his face to the ground, and is doing honor to this man whom he loves so much. Joseph said unto his father, "They are my sons, whom God hath given me in this place." And he said, "Bring them near, and I will pray for thee, and I will bless them." Verse 11, and Israel said unto Joseph, well, let me go to verse 12. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and he brought them near to him. Now Joseph put the oldest, Manasseh, where if Jacob will just reach out, his right hand will be on Manasseh's head, and his left hand will be on Ephraim's head. But listen, and Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim. He crossed him. He can't see real good, but he knows what he's doing. Now, once again, Jacob was the younger, Esau was the older. Jacob got the blessing and Esau didn't. This is repeated time and time again because God will have us to know that it's by grace, the choices and the blessings that he bestows. And Israel stretched out his right hand, placed upon Ephraim's head, who was younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, now notice God's going to be mentioned here 3 times, and said, God before whom my father Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God who fed me all my life long unto this day, and the angel who redeemed me from all evil. Now this is a reference to the Trinity. Jacob perhaps was not aware that he was given a Trinitarian formula here. But God the Father was the one who blessed, and God the Son, the Holy Spirit was the one who fed him, and the angel of the Lord is Jesus who redeemed him. It's the office of the Son to redeem. Verse 17, and Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim. It displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. Joseph said unto his father, not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Out of thy right hand, put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a great people. Both Ephraim and Manasseh are going to be strong tribes. But Ephraim is going to be the strongest, and after the kingdom divides in the days of Rehoboam, way down the line, the northern kingdom will go by the name of Ephraim part of the time. For Ephraim was the dominant tribe among the 9 tribes that went to the northern kingdom. His father refused and said, I know it. Verse 20, and he blessed them that day, saying, in thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. Now when he prayed, the Lord make thee as Ephraim and Manasseh, the Lord make you a great people, make you a multitudinous people. This is the blessing that Jacob is referring to. And Israel said unto Joseph, Behold, I die, but God shall be with you and bring you again into the land of our fathers. He is remembering that promise that God made to Abraham back in chapter 15, that your seed are going to be strangers in a strange land for 400 years, and they're going to serve them. And then will I bring you out and into this land. Jacob knows all about that. And I don't know whether he knows that that's where they are right now, that they're fulfilling that promise, but I suspect that maybe he does. So Jacob is saying to him, God is not going to leave you here forever. He's going to take you out of here one of these days. Moreover, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. One portion above thy brethren, the fact that he's given Ephraim a full standing and Manasseh. That's the portion above. Now, Joseph was buried at Shechem. That's where Jacob's well is. We don't know of anything in the Old Testament about Jacob digging that well, but when Jesus came to it that day and the Samaritan woman came out, that was Jacob's well. And it's still there today, and you can take a sip of water out of it if you choose to do so, and we did when we were there. But that is one of the positive sites. So somewhere in that area, Joseph was buried. Jacob and Leah and the rest of them were buried down in Hebron, but Joseph was buried up at Shechem. And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. The reason he's going to, I heard my daddy tell there were 5 boys and 4 girls in my daddy's family. My grandmother was dying with tuberculosis. She was at home. She remained conscious right up until the last. The day before she died, she called every one of those children in around her bed, and one by one she went to them, talking with them and urging them to meet her in heaven. And then she asked them to join together because 2 or 3 of the boys were musicians and they had an organ in the house, and they sang, I've heard of a land of joy and peace, and wonderful light, and my glory divine, I'm going that way. So this is what Jacob is going to do here. But one of the reasons that Jacob's going to do that, there's a long 400 years ahead of these boys and their descendants. And they need to know, they need something other they can get a hold of and say, well, now this is what is ahead of us in the future. So that's what these blessings and Jacob tells it like it is. He doesn't pull any punches. And we'll see that with Reuben. In the 33rd chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, Moses does the same thing. Now, no longer is it the original Reuben and Simeon and Levi and Judah. It's their descendants. But he blesses each one of these tribes, and it's interesting to compare the two, set them side by side, because they dovetail in. God was behind these blessings. In the 3rd verse, Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. My, what a wonderful blessing this is. Reuben was the firstborn, and Jacob had such high hopes of him. But it stops there. Listen at it. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, then defilest thou it. He went up to my couch. Back when he had an affair with Jacob's concubine, wasn't much said about it. But Jacob was fully aware of it, and Reuben is paying the price now. He sinned away the birthright which was his by the choices that he made. And I'm afraid that many young men and women are doing the same thing today in other ways. They are jeopardizing their future by what they do as young people. Simeon and Levi are brethren, instruments of cruelty. He lumps them together. Remember, Reuben the firstborn, Simeon's next, then Levi. It was Simeon and Levi who joined together and destroyed Shechem. And here, let me find the place. Verse 6, O my soul, come not thou into their secret, into their assembly, mine honor. Be not thou united, for in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung oxen. In the King James it says they tore down a wall or something. But what they did was to cut that leader in the backs of the legs of the ox. They did this maliciously, and these two boys have a mean, vindictive manner about them. Now here's what's going to happen to them. They've been together, working together. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. That's exactly what happened to the tribes of Simeon and Levi. Simeon, when they got into the land and got settled, they decreased in number from the time of the Exodus. They got a portion in the south of the tribe of Judah. And as the years passed, it wasn't long until some of them went over east of the Jordan River, and then they just sort of fade out of the picture. Simeon never did amount to anything much. Levi, who was going to be scattered among the tribes of Israel also, while they were at Mount Sinai, and they made this golden calf, or it may have been when they had the Moabite women to come among them. I'm cloudy on that right now. But Levi stood with Moses and redeemed himself. So when they got into the land, Levi didn't get a land inheritance. But Moses gave him 48 cities scattered among all the tribes, because Levi became the priestly tribe. And they wanted the priests to be available to everybody in the land. So Levi was scattered. He didn't have an inheritance, but nevertheless, God blessed him in what he did with him. Judah, the fourthborn, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Now, we look back and we remember that Judah married a Canaanite woman. He had an affair unknowingly with his daughter-in-law, and his heirs are through that daughter-in-law and the children that was born of that affair. But Judah has straightened himself up, and he's become a man. He's had a change of life, and for the last several times that he's been mentioned, he has been the leader of the tribe. Thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Judah is a lion's whelp from the prey. My son, thou art gone up. He stooped down. He crouched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? You ever heard of a lion before? In the 5th chapter of the book of Revelation, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah hath prevailed to take the book and loose the seals thereof. And John turned to see, and there was a lamb with the marks of sacrifice. Jesus is called the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And here's where that name comes from. Now, out of these 12 sons, 70 of them with their families went down into Egypt. It wasn't very long until there were several thousand of them. But while they're down in Egypt, they've become at least 2 to 3 million of them. Now, where are we going to look for the promised seed among 2 or 3 million people? Well, forget about all of them except the tribe of Judah. For here's where that Judah is singled out. Now, in the days that follow, God's going to cut it down some more. In the tribe of Judah, with its thousands of people, God chose David and said, your throne will be established. So forget everybody else, and you watch the family of David. And it keeps stepping down until you get to Nazareth, and there's Jesus and James and Simon and Jude and Job. 5 little boys, just one of them fits the demand to inherit the throne of David. That's Jesus. For the other 4 have got a curse against them. Down in verse 10, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come. That word Shiloh has caused the commentators a lot of anxiety trying to figure out what it meant. The word means peacemaker, and most conservative scholars believe it's a reference to Jesus. The scepter is not going to depart. The rulership, The scepter was that staff which the king had. He will have a ruler until the peacemaker comes. Zerubbabel came back from Babylon. He was of the house of David. He ruled for a while, and then it passed over to the priest. And then Herod the Great, who was an Amalekite, an Idumean. He was an Edomite, an Idumean. That was when Jesus appeared on the scene, because the law, the scepter, had departed from Judah. It all fits together. Let me skip on over to Zebulun Nazareth. If you get a map and look at where those tribes are laid, that's interesting when you read this and begin to fit them. Nazareth was in the territory of Zebulun. Issachar is a strong ass, crouching down between two burdens. And he saw that rest was good in the land, that it was pleasant. And he bowed his shoulder to bear and became a servant unto forced labor. He's lazy. He never amounted to much. He was strong, healthy, but he wasn't one of the go-getters. Let me skip to Dan. It's verse 16. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse's heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. I've waited for thy salvation, O Lord. In the 7th chapter of the book of Revelation, Dan is not mentioned. Now, in the 16th, 17th, 18th chapters of the book of Judges, Dan whined about the portion that was allotted him in the division of the land, his inheritance. He was given the seacoast where the plain of Sharon and Caesarea, Tel Aviv, Joppa, those great cities are located. Some of the finest farming land in Israel today is those coastal plains. But now the Canaanites were down there, and they had chariots of iron, and Dan was afraid to fight them. So Dan decided he'd find somewhere else. Sent a delegation up north and beyond the Sea of Galilee, at the foot of Mount Hermon. They found a town that the people were at peace. They didn't have walls around their city. They didn't have any magistrates, no leaders or anything. They went back and got the rest of the tribe, and they come up there and fell on them like a bunch of wolves and wiped them out. And Dan was located in the very north of the country. That's why we say from Dan to Beersheba. But on their way up there, there's a man named Micah who has made some idol gods, household gods, and he's hired Moses, his grandson, to be his priest. Well, the Danites see this, and they offer him a better salary, and he takes them up. So they take Micah's gods, and they take this renegade priest, and he becomes the priest of the tribe, and those gods become the gods of the tribe of Dan. And all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh, Dan was bowing down to Micah's idol gods. When Jeroboam became king, one of the golden calves was set up in the territory of Dan, and the other set up in Bethel. So Dan was the one who introduced idolatry into the land. I will not go through the rest of these names here. Over in verse 31, Jacob is telling them to take him back. He told Joseph, now he's taking every one of them, take me back to Canaan. Don't leave me down here. Now Joseph is the prime minister. He's got the authority to do that. So when Jacob had made an end of commanding his sons, he gathered up his feet into the bed and died and was gathered unto his people. And Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept upon him and kissed him. That's the 6th time that Joseph has wept. And he's going to weep once more in this 50th chapter. Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel. Still today, the Jews don't embalm their dead, as far as I know. They did not in other cases. But Jacob and Joseph were embalmed, and there was a reason for this. They're going to have to take Jacob all the way from Egypt back up to Hebron to bury him in the cave at Machpelah. He'll get to stinking before they get there if they don't embalm him. Now, when they embalmed, normally the priest would do the embalming, and it was a religious ritual that they went through because they were preparing the body to be an eternal thing that the Pharaoh will use in eternity. They'd cut a gash in the side, take out the liver, the kidneys, the stomach, the intestines, the lungs. They'd leave the heart in. Then they would take some kind of hooked instruments and go up through the nose and tear the brain out, and they had canopic jars. They'd put these organs in the jars along with preservative. They used natron, which I think is a form of saltpeter. And they would pack it in this cavity, and it's like salt. It dries things out. It is a type of salt. They'd leave the nitron in the body for a certain length of time. And when the body had dried enough, then they'd take that out and wash it real good. They'd pack it full of linen that had been soaked in spices and other ingredients that would preserve it. And then they'd wrap the wrappings around it. And this took 40 days. Joseph used the physicians instead of the priest to do it, the embalming of his daddy. That way there was no religious significance involved in embalming Jacob. Now they did the same thing to Joseph, but Joseph's no longer in power, so he stayed down there. But they got ready to take Joseph back, to take Jacob back. In verse 4, when the days of his mourning were past, now after they got him embalmed the 40 days, 30 more days were spent mourning. 70 days were spent mourning for the dead. Joseph spoke unto the house of Pharaoh. He didn't talk to Pharaoh himself. He has been, and we don't know for sure, but he has been involved in the preparation of his father's body. So it may be that he is unclean at this point. He has not gone through the purification ritual. So he asked some of his friends, the house of Pharaoh, some of the other servants, go in and ask Pharaoh, and they do. My father made me swear, saying, Lo, I die in my grave. I die in my grave which I have digged for me in the land of Canaan. There shalt thou bury me. Down in that cave of Machpelah, evidently they dug a grave there and buried them. They did Abraham and Sarah that way. Now, I'd never thought of that. I figured they just laid them on a slab or something there. But likely they dug a hole and put the body in there, because he says that he dug the grave there. Somewhere around about 1917 in World War I, when all the Muslims ran because the British soldiers were coming in, some British went down into that cave, and he said that he didn't see anything down there in it. Now that would have been 3,000 years ago that these folks were put there. Their dust had already crumbled and gone. But we know that Machpelah is one of the real sites in the land. But today, nobody can go down there. The Muslims won't allow it. They're in control of it. They've got a little light bulb on a wire hanging down, and you can peep through a crack and see a little bit of a cave down there, but that's all you can see. But Joseph sent word to Pharaoh, my father wanted to do this. Pharaoh said, verse 6, Go up and bury thy father according as he made thee swear. And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, and all the house of Joseph and his brethren and his father's house, only their little ones and their flocks and their herds they left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. They took soldiers along to protect them. They took wagons to haul the food, whatever else they needed on the way. An unbelievable procession come up, and it was the rich people of Egypt, just like when Prince Philip died here the other day. They wouldn't let the heads of states come in. But had not been for this virus, then President Biden or Vice President would have gone, and there'd been heads of state from all over the world come in to be at Prince Philip's funeral. Well, this is what happened when Jacob died. He was held in such high reverence, and the fact that Joseph held such a high position. Verse 10, And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan. You read the commentaries and they've got different opinions of this. If you look on the map, they probably followed about the same route that Moses and the children of Israel did on their exodus. Now they come up to Kadesh Barnea. If they were beyond Jordan, they went a little to the east and came up on the east side of the Dead Sea, and they stopped right at the north end of the Dead Sea if they were beyond Jordan. Or if they came up on the west side, but it says beyond Jordan. When they got there, there was a threshing floor of Atad. They spent another 7 days weeping. Now, the Canaanites didn't know what all this was taking place, and they were aghast that such a great number of people was there. They called it the mourning of Egypt. But when they spent those 7 days, then the 12 sons took Jacob's body. They went on down to Hebron and put him in the cave, and then the whole procession went back. Verse 15, Joseph's brethren saw their father was dead. They said, Joseph will perhaps hate us and will certainly requite us all the evil that we done to him. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall you say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren and their sin, for they did unto thee evil. And now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. We don't have any record of Jacob having said this. It may be they're making it up, or it may be that Jacob did tell them, asking them to be sure and tell Joseph to forgive you and to forget about this. But at last, they come to Joseph and acknowledge that they did him wrong. And that's good. Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save many people alive. You thought you were getting rid of me, but God just used you. He caused you to do His work. Somebody said that even His enemies are chained to the wheels of His chariot. And God's enemies do what God wants them to do. Joseph forgave them and told them that it was God's will that they do that. Now let me skip to verse 22. Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. He lived about 56 years after Jacob died. We don't know at what point he resigned his work as prime minister. Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up on Joseph's knees. Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you, and bring you out of this land unto the land which He swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. That coffin said to them every day that it sat there, This is not your home. You're going to go back to Canaan, because Joseph has said, You're going to take my bones with you and bury me, so don't bury me down here. Egypt is the land of tombs. Everywhere you look, the pyramids, the underground tombs, the mastabas, it's the land of tombs. Their great literary production was the Book of the Dead. They lived to get ready to live in eternity. Those pyramids have got false doors in them where the spirit can pass back and forth, they believe. They've got temples where they put food and stuff for the spirit to come and eat. But that coffin with a body in it was a daily reminder of them. We've got an empty tomb. That says we're not going to be here always. Our home is somewhere else. We need to look and listen to that. Any comments now? Yes. As the natural man, the old man of the flesh.
Okay, here in these 47 and 48 and 49, he's back and forth with Israel and Jacob in the same thing. Now, is he still using that?
Not perhaps as much there as back earlier. But still, if you look at it close enough, you can tell that Jacob means the old man of the flesh, while Israel means the man of the spirit, the man who has faith in God. In the 7th chapter of the book of Acts, Stephen said that they were oppressed 400 years. In the first 12th chapter of Exodus, their entire stay was 430 years. So about 30 years after they got down there, they started oppressing them. And in that first chapter where it says, another king arose who knew not Joseph, I believe that that is the Hyksos king. And instead of him being good to Joseph, like most of the commentaries won't, he was the one that oppressed him. Or if you read that first chapter twice, the Pharaoh says that these children of Israel are going to be more than my people. And they'll join with our enemies and destroy us. Jacob's family was not more than the Egyptians, but they were more than the Hyksos. So the Hyksos oppressed them for about 100 or 200 years. Then the Egyptians took back over and they continued the oppression. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Brother Alvin. There's a long way around it, but we appreciate you coming to finish that whole book. You started out just 11 chapters and you ended up going 50, didn't you? Well, we do appreciate it. Thank you for coming all this time. Hope you have a successful gardening season and get some rest. All right, the prayer list tonight: Margie Johnson, the Scott family, Hall family, the Seals family, Unspoken, Sonda Hill, the Harden family, Mary Wood, Alice Roper, the Longston family, Bobby Alford family.
My stepbrother,
Okay.
Bobby Alford.
Alford. Clint Criscoe, Brother Pat and Miss Betty Matthews and their family, Vicki Gibbons, Charlotte Hardy, Sam Thomas, Mr. Patterson's family and Doug, Kay Edmondson, Harold Johnson, Andy Brown, Clark Johnston, Carolyn Chun, and Linda Harden. Need to add Janet's mother, Mary Faye Brown. Any others?
Is Kenneth on there?
No, he's not.
A lady at work told me today had a spot on her kidney. Her name's Brianna. I can't remember her last name. Lord knows her. I just hope she gets a good, they're gonna check her out and see what it is. And, just pray for her.
Kim Lang and her family, she has a lot of health issues.
Who is that?
Kim Lang.
Kim Lang.
And her family, and then April Vanilla and Maya.
Hi, Jody. She has to have back surgery next week.
Others? Any others?
Hey, Larry,
Yes,
I know Heather Scott family on there, Heather Leslie has a little more vision more than some of the rest of that, and I think she had a harder day today. So, mention her every time they pray.
any others? Brother Greg, will you just let us in a word of prayer?
Father, we thank you for your many blessings that you bestow upon us. Lord, you take all these prayer requests and show evidence lead, guide, and direct, keep us safe, use us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Be blessed,